you're watching, or welcome to if you've never seen us before. This is 123 Conversations, a show where we have one topic with two hosts, myself, Candace Thomas, and the lovely Terry Dean, and we ask three questions around the topic. So our one topic today is a special guest, but before we get to it, a little bit about myself. I am an intuitive coach, which is just a fancy pants way of saying I teach leaders how to use their intuition on purpose to create results for themselves, their clients, and their communities. My co-host Terry, who is over here on my screen, you just raised your hand. That's so hilarious. But Terry has been an entrepreneur for a billion years. She's had over 30 years of experience in helping with sales and marketing and just connecting, and also is a creative entrepreneur. And we're so fortunate to be joined with Sussie Goldman, who's down below on my screen. Apologies if it gets a little bit wonky. But Sussie is amazing. She told me not to be fluffy, and it just makes me want to fluff it up. But I'll be good. I promise. Sussie has over 8 years of experience as a trained social worker, hypnotherapist, certified EFT practitioner, and a whole bunch of alphabet things behind that, on top of being a single mom to 4 kids. So really excited to have her on to talk about what keeps her motivated, what drives her to do the things that she does. And one of her biggest things, or one of the things that she helps people with the most, is breaking their cycles of feeling stuck. So we're definitely going to dive into all of those. Sussie, thank you for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fabulous. Thank you for having me.
All right, you're welcome. I want to just dive right into things that I'm really curious about. And something else that I left out that you are is Sussie's also highly intuitive, and I know incorporates intuition in some aspects of the work that she does. I'm just really curious, being a social worker has got to be so challenging and so hard just in and of itself, especially with, I know you personally with some of the cases that you've taken on. What is motivating you to do that kind of work? Like, what is the reason you got into it, and why?
So I wasn't planning to get into it. I never decided that I was going to be a social worker. I didn't think I was going to be doing any of this work. So I like to say in my previous lifetime in the same body, my world was completely different. I used to be a professional hairstylist. I started at age 16. Had nothing to do with emotion, nothing to do with dealing with people's pain, anything like that. Just a little bit of background to explain how I got to where I got to. I was born and raised in the ultra Orthodox Jewish community. And I'm going to explain a little bit of what that looks like for those of you who don't know what it means, or a lot of people are not familiar or only hear from the news, which is a terrible place to find out about anything because it's very much painted or exaggerated or whatever. So basically what it meant for me is that we grew up in a very sheltered environment where the decisions were made for me, pretty much about everything. So I was very much an out of the box child. I was highly sensitive, highly intuitive. I knew what other people wanted before they even asked for it. I was a super people pleaser. I wanted to fit in because I didn't fit in. I almost fit in. So what that means is I was a kid who got good grades in school. However, when the teacher asked you to take out the math book, I could never figure out how people would just know how to put their math book. Like, because for me, everything would come flying out. Like, everything that was in front of the math book would just come like that and would just tumble out. And I only found out a lot later that I had ADHD, but that wasn't something that I knew as a child. To me, it was just, I always felt like I almost got there. Like, it wasn't quite being successful, but the image was really good. So I learned how to fit in, and I used the intuitive part of me, the people-pleasing parts to compensate for everything that didn't fit. We also learned how to tolerate really well. So things I didn't like, I just kind of poked myself out of it. Um, so back to the way I was raised, everything was kind of decided for me. I knew exactly what was going to happen. I was going to get married, support my husband, which is a very strong value for us, for the city that I was raised with. That they spend a lot of time with Torah learning, the men. So the women are there to support their husbands. I was engaged at 17 in an arranged marriage. So we had a 10-minute sit and date um, before it was a 10 minutes sit and date. My parents chose the boy for me, and after 10 minutes, we were engaged, and then there was the party, right? And
Wow.
just want to say, this is a system that works for a lot of people. Like statistically, there aren't necessarily happier marriages from people who go and date for years and years and all that. There's been a lot of research done on it. And for me, it was just the norm. I didn't have any other expectations, except that I was a highly, probably a combination of intuitive and also a little bit of a rebel. So I had a lot of questions. I got into a lot of trouble as a kid. And then eventually I just learned to toe the line if I wanted to be anything or accomplish anything. I wanted to fit in and I wanted to please, but I also had that very rebellious, mischievous side to myself. So it was a real challenge. I thought everyone was like that. I didn't think that it was just me. And it wasn't, and I always had that feeling of like, I'm almost getting there. It's like, I'm almost making it. So at the age of 16, I was, I am very creative. So, and I loved playing with hair. I love doing hair. So someone offered to do a training and a course, and I just went ahead and I got it. I never really thought of starting my business. It was just kind of happened. It's like I started doing hair, and then I had a long lineup of people wanting me to do their hair. And then the next thing I knew, oh, I can do this. And then things happened. So it was a little bit more of a leap before I look situation. I'm just going to do this, and the next thing I'm here, which pretty much is how I got to the rest of my life, and I'll explain. So I got married at 18. I had a 7.5 month engagement, which is very common. During the engagement period, we don't talk, the husband and wife. And again, I'm talking about the community that I was in. There are many different Jewish communities that are different, but that was just where I grew up in. So I didn't see this guy. I met him for 10 minutes. I didn't see him until the night of my wedding, right? Um, College education was not something that I was going to do. I was going to get married and have a lot of kids. So I'm one of 12. I'm the oldest girl. I'm the second in my family. Um, my mom had 12, so I was gonna at least beat that. I was gonna go for 14. I mean, at least 14, as if we had that much, right? But it was what we knew. It was kind of like the of choice. I wanted to be very successful, so I went from being like totally out, like space cadet, to being extremely driven. I kind of overcompensated because I wanted to make sure that I'm gonna arrive to where I don't know, but to somewhere like I was gonna fit in. Um, I got so I got married and had 4 kids in 5 years. At the age of 24, is when I started having physical symptoms. It was kind of like my body was not on board. Again, emotions were not really talked about. It was you got to do this because you got to do this, and it wasn't. It's almost as if spirit took me because, and again, spirit is what I'm going to use now for like God, higher power, all that. It was like I was literally led because there was no reason for it not to have worked. There are a lot of people who are in the system and it really works for them. I have a lot of family members who really works for them. It's when it stops working, when you only need to start asking questions that that's when a lot of the things didn't fit anymore. So it wasn't like it's a lifetime of suffering. I feel like that's what happens a lot when people make changes in their life. It's like, how did I live that way back then?
Right.
It worked because it worked back then, and now it doesn't work anymore. So for me, uh, everything worked, and I wanted it to continue working until my body broke down. And I started I went through the medical world, and it was pretty much unexplained. They said, you're healthy. I was, I think, 130 pounds, fully, like my blood work was fine. There was nothing wrong with me, except that it was deeply impacting my life. I went to the holistic world because someone said, oh, this woman may be able to help you. Ended up at a kinesiologist. I tried everything. And kinesiologist tells me your mind is controlling your body. And this sounds funny to me now, but at the time, I remember thinking that hypnotherapy is what I had heard about. Someone, like, I thought it was like people doing something with your brain and like doing some sort of magic with it. So I call this guy who's advertised, and he's a hypnotist. And I say, can you help me with this and this issue? And he's, yeah, it's like, I can do that. And I literally thought, I remember thinking he's going to take my brain and do something with it. Don't ask me how. I was just like, he's going to do something with my mind. Um, Turns out that was the beginning of a very deep awakening, or that was kind of like what got me into the emotions. I didn't think I had any emotions. I didn't think it wasn't that I wasn't sensitive. It was like emotions were for weak people. Emotions were for people who had problems. I didn't think I had any problems. I was able to pretty much fight through my life and do what I needed to do, even though things were hard sometimes, and sometimes they were good. It wasn't good is relative, right? So if all I know is playing with Legos, that like that's my version of bliss. It wasn't like I needed anything better. Um, so when I started doing the work, what happened was that I needed to reevaluate everything that I knew to be true until then. So a lot of the things that I had been raised with, a lot of the messages, a lot of the beliefs were no longer fitting for my reality. So, and that's very often what happens when people, I don't want to call it leave because you don't have to leave in order for you to reevaluate what works and what doesn't work. What happened though was that because of the way the system is organized, they prefer to keep their families sheltered. And when you start questioning any system, people need to readjust to the system. They need to readjust to the reality. And I lost a lot of my friends. I lost a lot of my people. I suddenly found myself with just me and actually needing to make choices. And I had no idea how to do that. We have something called rabbis, and I don't know what the equivalent would be elsewhere, but that's kind of where they get to make the decisions and choices for you. And we would have to, like when I have clients now who they're just gonna go ask their rabbi, and I have to say there's a sense of almost like jealousy where they genuinely feel at peace with it. But I understand it because I was there. So it's like life is good. The rabbi said it was gonna be okay, and they're okay. And it really works. So it's not about whether it's right or wrong. It's just, it needs to work for you. What happens is that once you leave and you start having a lot of questions and you start asking questions, some of these, you can't unsee what you've already seen.
Right.
And some of these situations just don't fit. So that's when I started. So I was using a lot of these skills and tools that I learned when I was going to heal my physical reality. Something that I was always very passionate about, which had nothing to do with being a therapist and nothing to do with being an EFT practitioner, was that I had this belief that, okay, so it really was a belief in spirit, God, but I believed in the impossible.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need to tangibly see it. It was very real to me. What I know now after learning how to access my intuition in a more tangible way, and also um, having my own experiences, my own psychic experiences, I can understand experiences that I had back then. But while I was going through it, it was more of this really deep belief that God is never going to leave us and anyone can do it. It was so when I learned how to do here, and people would be like, wow, that's amazing. And I also wanted them to be able to do it, right? I thought it was easy. Everyone can do it.
Mm-hmm.
I have this, one of my strong abilities is to be able to see potential in people where they don't see it. So I can see someone and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And it would be so real to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, which helps me now. But back to how I got to this. So I wanted everyone to be able to have this. I saw it was so easy. I saw where they would potentially be able to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked for me. And then I wanted everyone to have it. So I went and I got certified for as an EFT practitioner, and then first as a hypnotherapist, then EFT practitioner. And then that part of me hasn't changed, except that I've created some, I've kind of grounded it more into reality, which is after I got diagnosed with ADHD much later, and I learned how to implement executive functioning skills and all that. But that was pretty much how I got to where I got to. And it's still, and it has evolved. My way of dealing with people, my way of understanding what actually helps people has definitely changed. For me, it is super important to help people know how to choose, meaning they have the right to choose. And I think that's what makes us human, is that we have the ability of choice and to really own that. Um, Another thing is the understanding of connection to self and connection to spirit. We're all going to go through life and crash multiple times. It's just reality. For me, it is super important to the people who work with me are able to build resilience. They're able to get stronger so that they don't have to collapse
Mm-hmm.
instead of needing to decide the rest, like, this is how I'm going to do it for the rest of my life. This is what I'm going to be for the rest of my life. Because I didn't plan anything. I really made decisions in the moment. And growing up, I thought it was a mistake. I would naturally be like, oh, I'm going to do this now. And then people would say, like, well, you have a math test tomorrow. You better be studying. And I'd be like, I'll be fine. And I'm just going to go and have fun right now. So I had this belief that I'm doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There must be a way to do it. There must be a system that, an order to things. And what I learned after trying so hard to put things into a system and order, that there really is no order besides for building my own container and making myself stronger as a person so that I am more resilient and a lot more fluid.
Yeah, and I think too, when you just said something that kind of hit with me too. It's like, I'm going to just go have fun. And I think sometimes when we can pull ourselves right into that spot, it spirals us right to where we need to be, because when we're not in that state of resistance, we're just in a space of allowance. And just like Candace talks about a lot of times, you know, just like the nap, the value of taking a nap. And I'm very much like that too. It's like, I just want to go have fun. And when I have fun, then things kind of work out better for me when I'm in that happy place. So yeah, I think that's really important. And I think it's also really fascinating how you're making so many strong points for people around the world. It just goes back to, it's how we grow up, and what we're exposed to becomes our reality. But when something happens that disrupts that, or we see out of another little lens and we say, oh my gosh, like that's really interesting over there. Then we get to explore and become more of our full self. But I'm thinking too, we can't control what environment we're born into. So we have to always just like look at children with love and treat everyone with total respect, because we're born into different cultures, different, you know, regions. Some people just by being born in the United States and with I want to just say like the blonde hair and the blue eyes, like you've already got a set of privilege that's been assigned to you just by how you look and maybe the community that you're born into. And I think all people just need to be seen with love and not judged, you know. And I think we're just in this culture that's really quick to judge certain people, you know. It's like, you know, look at that family over there. It's like that family may be in that position because that's all they have been exposed to at this point. So it's really nice because it sounds like you can bring that really rich experience to the clients that you work with a deep level of understanding, to just support them on their journey, no matter what that looks like, or just continue to bless them where they are if it's working for them. Sometimes we don't know it's not working unless we see something else, but who's to say? Who's to say?
I mean, who is to say? And what really stands out for me, and I could just listen to you talk. Like if you notice, people who've watched our show before, by this point, Terry and I usually have asked 1,000 questions. We're both like, what? 10 minutes?
I don't
and
think
then what?
This quiet run into the show. I'm like, I want to jump in. Oh, just listen. You have 2 of these and 1 of these. Like, listen.
Right. Sussie, you have shut me up. But my question for you, well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge something. You've said so many powerful things. And it is hard when you're born into a system, and especially when you start feeling this isn't right for me. And I like how you said it was physical. It wasn't emotional, because who needs emotions, which cracks me up. Right. Which actually, I feel like a lot of men that I know they don't think that it's a myth that men aren't emotional as women. I find that in my experience with the men I've encountered, they're way more emotional. They just don't think that they are. They do something else with it. And they think it's intellect when it's like, no, those are your emotions. But it was very telling. If something isn't working for you, how your body will tell you the truth. We can do all this stuff mentally and emotionally and figure it out. But that's something that happened with me when I was working for the federal government, and I started to get physically ill and sick. And then I was just going to emotional pits of despair where it was really like blame and shame everyone else but looking at me. And I also was a strong people pleaser. And looking back, I mean, that was a pretty obvious sign that what I was doing wasn't right. But it really struck a chord with me when you said, oh, I've almost got it right, because that's what kept me not looking. It was like, oh, well, maybe if I try a little harder, maybe if I just go for this promotion, maybe if I should just like go ahead and buy a house, maybe if I should just go and start like doing more travel, as opposed to really looking at myself. And that feeling never went away. Like, I'm not quite right. I'm almost there. And yet I'm falling apart in many other ways. I really like how you pointed that out, because again, you can't tell just because, and I love how you're saying, just because it didn't work out for you doesn't make it bad or wrong or not good, because it's working for other folks. Exactly. And the real barometer isn't from a mental judgment place. It's a physically, this is making me sick place. Like, I am having an experience here, and no one can tell me that. No one else can say it's right or wrong for me. Only I can know that. So I love that. And my question for you is, like, you said that you were led by spirit, God, whatever the word is for it, you were led by spirit. Like, that's what got you out of it when you were having the sensations, and then like finding these different things like hypnotherapy, which opened the door. What would you say to someone who just doesn't even know where to begin? Like a person who knows whatever they're doing, not even related to religion, but they know that where they are is not where they're supposed to be. And you spoke about, you always believed in the impossible, you had that connection, but what would you say to someone who they don't have that? You know, they feel like this isn't for me, but they don't know where to go. What's the next step for someone in that situation?
So that's a great question. So for me, it wasn't, so when I say I was led, sometimes I was dragged. It was it wasn't like it wasn't always, yes, I had my spiritual moments where I had all these deep insights and really interesting, cool things happen, which will probably keep you here for another 3 hours. But so I had some of these experiences. What happened was that I'm going to go back to what faith means to me, which is it means something else to different people. So I'm not a believer in blind faith, because blind faith to me is stupidity. Why would you trust something if you don't know anything about it? So for me, faith is an embodied experience. It's I have enough proof and enough evidence in my life that there is a greater power. But something I call creator, spirit, whatever you want to call the power and force that created everything, created life, and is still guiding me. And again, that the label or title, whatever people want to use for that. So for me, that was very much experiential. I needed to get my own proof that it works. Now, just the thing here, I was raised in the Jewish community, which is the entire Jewish community is the way our religion is set up is on belief, right? So we have the Torah, which is what we consider God gave us the Torah to follow, which is a code of laws on how to live. So I was raised with, oh, with God's help, you'll be able to do this, right? Or God will make things work out. That was part of the language that we use in our everyday. We say blessings before we eat. It's part of our everyday routine. So for me, the challenge was separating spirituality from religion. And I needed to own that for myself. And I really screwed up with that, because when you drop anything, when you start seeing something that needs to shift, you don't know. I mean, some people do. Some people say, oh, I know I want to go there. I had no idea where I was going. I just knew this isn't working for me. I am done. I can't deal with this. So anything that is better than this or different than this is better than where I am right now. I can't deal with this. What happened though is that I got into a very defensive place because people would start challenging me, right? You don't even know what you're doing. Things are gonna go to shit. Your life is gonna go down the drain. You're ruining yourself. You're destroying your kids. I mean, you name it. I was confronted with all of these, and people don't like when you change, because that means that they also need to change. People put it this way: if you're leaving, they need to reestablish their identity, reestablish their life, reestablish everything else that your presence meant for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like I knew where I was going, and I needed to give myself permission. So that's the answer to your question, to not know. And in the beginning, I was really trying to figure things out. What happened was I would make some things right and some things wrong. So I would go around to um, different sects, different people, and everyone would tell me why their way was exactly the right way, and how the way I was raised was terrible and abusive, and that should never have happened. And what I found very confusing was that I would see the limits in their way of living.
Mm-hmm.
And because once you start challenging everything.
Right.
And I didn't necessarily see that they were happier. I just saw that they had justified their way of being.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very confusing to me. So at first, I was just busy unraveling everything. It's like, why doesn't it work? Nothing is working here, right? And so that's what happens many times. The foundation goes first, and then you start taking whatever you want. And I think a key is to be willing to not know and working on the understanding that you're always being guided, always being led. That faith is experiential. It's not something that I just need to believe in here. It's actually letting yourself collapse, letting yourself. Uh, I had a therapist who said it once really well. I was trying to keep everything together like this. So he's like, I can't. I have 4 kids. Things are going to fall apart. I'm going to lose them. I mean, everything is going to go. And she's like, in life, you're always going to be juggling balls.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the balls, sometimes you have many balls to juggle, and things are going to fall. They're going to, like, some of the balls will just drop. Just try to make sure that the ones that drop are not made of glass,
Mm-hmm.
that they're the rubber ones that are, because things will bounce back. And they did. It's really very hard to try to control pain. What happens when we try to control pain is that resistance actually causes more pain. So for me, it very much was trusting in the connection that I needed to redefine for myself. And I think that's really the key to making any change, is being willing to take responsibility for that. And like you said, Candace, to sit with yourself.
Yeah.
Oh,
Doing
no.
internal work instead of, like, Candace was talking about, well, if I get this next promotion, or if I could just move to a different city, or if I blah, blah, blah. So we look for all this external fix. And, pretty much, I'm guessing what the percentage, maybe 100% of the time, we've got to go inside. And that's really uncomfortable for people to have to take those, deep investigations of what's going on with how we're feeling. And just like you said, that resistance, it manifests in our bodies. And so even if we just can start there, if we're starting to, if people don't see it or know it in their mind, but when physical ailments start cropping up, just working from that point, for people who don't even know something might be up, it's like, okay, why is this, and what does this mean? And maybe I should take a look at this pain, and what might that can be connected to.
And with that, I just want to point out, Sussie had gone to doctors and they didn't see anything wrong with her, because I want to be very clear, right? Like, if you start having health issues, like, go get that checked out if you can. Don't just be like meditating and then dying because you have something that was undiagnosed. So it's like,
I knew
just throw that little bit in there.
About meditation. It wasn't part of things that I did. And the other thing, yeah, very much what you were saying. I think that there's a great, I don't know if you've heard of Maimonides. So he used to be the top doctor, and he said, what's the best way for a person to go? It's to go the middle way, right? Not too right and not too left. However, the problem with that is that if you look around, everyone thinks that they're in the middle way. Like, these people, they're crazy. Those people, they're far too gone, right? And everyone has their middle way. For them, it's like, and I have to say, for me, the middle way has shifted so many times over my life, because when I was extremely sheltered and I didn't know anything, there were people that were extremely, like, totally, like, they would bake their own bread, and I would be like, oh, that's crazy, right? And then there were people who would be like totally open-minded, and I'd be like, I'm not doing that, right? And then that's my middle way. And now my middle way, it's like, you've got to keep redefining that, and that's okay. And it's not about whether it's right or wrong. It's really about how is it working for you right now. It's all aspects of us.
Right.
There is anything that is dangerous. Sometimes people need help.
Right.
It's not dangerous. All aspects of us are okay and valid. It's not that we need to operate only from a spiritual point of view, only from a human point of view. It's really getting present with what is, rather than needing to fix it or change it or grow out of it, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's constant evolution. That's life, right? And you mentioned the EFT. You're an EFT practitioner. I mean, that too, to me, is so valuable for those people. I'll out myself sometimes, like me, who have a hard time like articulating what it is I'm feeling or actually even saying the words. But you know, you get me to do a little tapping in the right situation with maybe the right person, and I'm like on my knees, but it clears it for me, and then I can step forward from there. So that's a very powerful technique. I'm sure that you utilize with your clients too. Am I correct?
Yes, and a big part of EFT is about saying the truth of what is in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
This is what's happening to me right now, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Even before the tapping, before actually moving the energy, so many people are afraid of admitting, like, I'm in pain right now. That's the truth. That's just what's happening right now, and I'm okay. That's a very big piece of it. Plus the learning how to move their energy. For me, it was super important that people are not victims. So there is I'm saying this carefully because sometimes abuse is abuse is abuse is abuse. No matter how well you deal with your emotions, there's reality that happens, and sometimes for reasons I don't understand, but I'm sure there's a good reason for it. People do things that are objectively speaking wrong. They're just out there and they are hurting people. And I'm saying this because we're not going to wash over. My emotions are my reaction. That's my responsibility. But when things happen, bad things happen in the world, and I'm going to sit there and say, well, go tap.
Yeah. Right. Right. No, I get that. I do get that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I think that the way I like to use the tapping is very much about saying the truth about what's happening right now and validating the truth. And when we allow that to open up, it creates space for all of us, creates space for our complete experience.
Mm-hmm.
I have not heard that explained like that about EFT, and I find that very refreshing. I freaking love that. Validating the truth about right now, EFT. For those of you who aren't familiar with EFT, that's the emotional freedom technique. There are tons of videos all over YouTube with people who are talking about it. Please finish watching this one, and then you can go explore if you've never heard of it before. And then, of course, you could also reach out to Sussie,
right.
Which we could go into. I just find your story, your whole deal. I love your whole deal. Being mushy again. I love your whole deal, Sussie. But definitely want to have you back to talk about more things. What's a great way for people to get a hold of you? Where can they find out about more of what you do, or if they want to work with you, what's the best way for them to connect?
You can go to my website, myintuitiveconnections.com, or my email is sussie@myintuitiveconnections.com, or I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Sussie Goldman. So
right on. And we'll have all of those in wherever you're watching or listening to the show, we'll have links in the show notes with the website information for sure. And Terry, how might people get a hold of you?
I was going to crack a joke, but I won't. Let's just go.
No, well, now you have to crack the joke. You can't leave us hanging.
You might find me at the farm somewhere. I don't know even know what I was going to say. I was going to make some wisecrack, but yeah, I usually don't do that when we get to this point. I've never done that. Anyway. Okay, so you can find me on LinkedIn at Terry, T-R-R-I, last name Dean, D-E-A-N, or you can go to femcity.com and you can look me up in the directory there. And Candace, let's tell our friends and family, where can they find you?
I'm trying to think of a good joke now, but I can't think of anything except on the farm, but for those of you watching, Terry literally does go to a farm a lot.
Right.
So yeah. My website is CandiceThomasIntuitive.com. You can also find me on Instagram at CandiceIntuitive. And I just joined Clubhouse, and I do talks there every week. Depending on when you're watching it, I might be doing something else. But for the moment, I'm on Clubhouse. On Clubhouse, I'm at Candice Thomas, so you can follow me and see all the stuff that I'm doing. And of course, you can check us out here. We post to 1 to 3 conversations every week. A video goes up where it might be just Terry and I talking, or another phenomenal guest like Sussie. And Sussie, it really was great to have you on the show. Would love to have you back again. And yeah, thanks everyone for being here. And if you stay long enough for this video, you'll be shown other videos that YouTube recommends if you like this, of another guest that you might really resonate with. So please take moments to like this video and subscribe to our channel to see more phenomenal interviews. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
1, 2, 3, 4.